this will be very frustrating to the listener, but we've talked about it for at least 4 years now.
Yeah.
We've
So, how's everybody doing? I'm here with Ed Chavez, the publisher from Denpa. They've released licenses for series such as Inside Mari, the Amiya Family, Kaiji, and coming up very soon is March Comes In Like a Lion. How are you?
I'm well. How are you doing, Shamu?
Good, good. So I just wanted to jump right in and just get a little understanding about like what the process for that goes behind publishing something like March Comes In Like a Lion or almost anything in your catalog currently.
That's a really long story.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I can really, titrate it down to just a couple of minutes, but
I guess in your interview with Crunchyroll that released about a
hmm
couple months ago, you mentioned that it was because that you had the licensing with Panpanya, which you've released Invitation of a Crab when you guys first launched in
hmm
2018. I think your most recent addition to the catalog was another volume or anthology series by Panpanya. Is that correct?
It's not necessarily our most recent book. We have had a couple other books since, but yeah, that we released another Campania book back in December 2022. So it's been about 2 months.
How
But
is that link to getting a license secured for March Comes in Like a Lion, which is a
mm,
pretty successful series with a
mm,
successful anime that's never been
mm.
introduced to the West?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's also a pretty long story, but let's see. So basically, the question is, how does one go about acquisitions?
Yes.
In a roundabout way. Yeah, acquisitions is a pretty unique process. Not every publisher does it the same. I used to work for Vertical, which is now a part of Kodansha USA.
Hmm.
And then prior to that, worked at Seven Seas and did a little bit of stuff for Dark Horse and Viz and then Kodansha in Japan. I wasn't doing licensing for Viz or Dark Horse or Kodansha in Japan, though.
Hmm.
It was more translation and editing. But for like the last 15 years, the process of licensing hasn't necessarily changed all that much, but how you do it is, like I said, it varies from publisher to publisher. And in my case, it starts off basically by just finding titles that you like. So, for example, with the works of Pampania that you brought up, he's an artist that I've been following since before, obviously the Denpa days,
Yeah.
and it was one of those situations where I was aware of their work because I've been very keyed into the Japanese doujinshi scene
Hmm.
since the early aughts. I used to actually host a podcast where I would
Yeah,
interview
the
people.
manga cast, correct?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would go to Japan sometimes and go to Comic-Con and events like that or Comedia and talk to people on the ground, artists, some of the people who ran those shows, some of the critics about doujinshi. And Pampanya is someone who's very tied into that community. He
Hmm.
actually provides the art for Comedia, which is the largest indie doujin convention in Japan. And what
Hmm.
I mean by indie doujins is these aren't fan comics, so these aren't parodies.
Yeah.
All the artists that go to Comedia create their own original work and sell it there. So those things are kind of like zines here in the States.
Hmm.
And in many cases, people don't know about about what's going to be written. They make completely new stories with completely new characters and may not be series or anything like that. And so there's a lot of risk taking under those circumstances. And because Pampania has been kind of working in that realm for so long, he's been kind of embraced by that scene where, yeah, he was drawing stuff for Comedia, eventually started drawing stuff for Mandarake, which is this big kind of Japanese or actually pop culture resale store in Japan. Started off kind of in Tokyo and has expanded all across the country. And they sell everything from comics to CDs, DVDs, figures, model trains, you name it. As long
Nice.
as it's about a part of pop culture, and he provides the art to their catalogs every year and art for their annual like big kind of like garage sales that they do.
Hmm.
And being aware of his work, actually, I should say, when I was in the process of launching Denpa, I reached out to his publisher in Japan, Hakusensha, and I inquired about what the status of his manga was in the States. And I'd worked with Hakusensha a little bit when I was at Vertical. We did 2 titles with them back then. Things were a little bit more on the closer to the mainstream side for those works, and so they were a little curious about why we went after something that was so indie. Indie even for them, like one of the two marketing, I should say licensing directors was kind of surprised that I even brought up the name. The
Because
lead,
it's so like grassroots type of like,
So, yeah, exactly. And
yeah.
so indie and so niche and nothing anime-ish at all.
Hmm.
While the head licensing manager was like, "Oh, okay, so you know about this artist?" And I was like, "Yeah, no, I've been following them for a bit." And she was like, "Okay, well, if you're interested in this, yeah, by all means, give it a shot. I'm very curious about how that's going to turn out." And
Hmm.
I was very straight up with them, saying, "Okay, thank you. You will get back to you and send you an offer sheet and let you know what our expectations are for this. But I also want to be forthcoming and say, I don't expect this title to be, a mega hit
Hmm.
by any sense of the imagination. But at the same time, I think it's going to be something very important for us to be able to share with the readership that is starting to grow and mature, unlike what we saw like 10, 15 years ago before the manga bubble burst. A lot of things were really just poppy and really mainstream, and
Hmm.
now we're starting to see a lot more diversity in titles, so that intrigued them. We also picked up another title from an artist called Asumiko Nakamura, who I've worked with quite a bit when I was at Vertical. She was nominated for an Eisner Award back then, and we had a couple of things from her that did quite well. So that was Maiden Railways that we picked up, and that was kind of cemented with them that we were looking for very important artists and
Hmm.
not necessarily focusing on just whatever is trendy right now.
That a lot of people here in the States would definitely not know of unless they were
Yeah,
part of that culture.
Yeah, I mean, people know of Asumiko.
Hmm.
She has had like anime adapted from some of her, particularly her BL work. But one of the things about her at the time in Japan is that she was winning a bunch of like really critical awards over there. So, and those aren't things that we see here in the States. We rarely even see people covering what awards are won in Japan. So,
No, that's
and
fair.
there, and even there aren't any awards here outside of, I guess, Crunchyroll and kind of the
Yeah.
Eisner Awards.
Hmm.
And both of them aren't really good indicators because the Eisner Awards are industry voting for each other essentially. So
Hmm.
it's a popularity contest, and Crunchyroll is exactly that. It's literally a
Yeah.
popularity contest. It's not people critically looking at this stuff. So that did give him like a sense of confidence that we were willing to do other things. And by the time that we released those two books, and those two books were two of our four launch titles,
Hmm.
they quickly got an impression that, yeah, we were in a different way from our competitors in the US market. We were definitely looking at the manga in a very holistic type of way. So in a very humanist type of way. So if you were ever to pick up any of our books, you'll notice that none of them are really that much the same. And what I mean by that is, yeah, the trim size might be the same trim size for all the books, but say you pick up Invitation from a Crab, you will notice that the cover is like really textured,
It's
and the
beautiful.
paper stock is very unique. And then once you open inside, you'll see end papers, so those green sheets
Hmm.
on the inside and the back. Like those are little details that are available in the Japanese edition that we thought, okay, yeah, we can do this because it's not going to kill us financially. And even some of the other details. So if you open up the book and look inside the French flaps, you'll see some weird art inside.
Textures, yeah.
Yeah. So that's a brick pattern that actually is on the Japanese cover. Not
Oh,
the
that's
not the
so cool.
jacket, but
Uh-huh.
if you take off the jacket of the Japanese, that's the art
Yeah,
that you
there's
will see.
another inside
Yeah.
cover in there,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
And that's an actual photograph taken by Pampagna that he put on there.
Oh, that
So
is so cool.
and those little type of details we wanted to maintain. And same thing if you read Goyaba no Holiday, the
Mhm.
bunch of little touches in there too. It's a different type of paper stock. And same thing if you end up buying Little Leo, you'll notice that's a flexi bound book. We thought
Mhm.
about that for Little Leo because it's a book for children,
Yeah,
and we know
and
that
that's
kids
just a
books tend
reader,
to,
yeah, much
yeah.
easier, like, reading experience, yes.
Exactly, yeah. So
Mhm.
we don't want the books to be damaged as easily. So the flexi-bound cover being closer to a hardcover gives it that durability for multiple reading. And even things that we did for like Baby Bear's Bakery, doing things in two color, which is very unique in America now. That was something
Mhm.
we saw like in the 60s and 70s a long time ago. But bringing back those type of printing techniques, we thought this would be really cool, and it's definitely going to set us apart from the rest of the market. Isn't necessarily going to bring us sales? Not exactly, but it does set us apart, not just in the market here, but in the eyes of the Japanese licensors that we're working with and the Japanese artists that we're working with. They look at that and they're like, wow, these guys really care. What was very touching about Hakusensha with that relationship was, unbeknownst to us at the time, about 6 months later, they ended up showing up at Anime Expo.
Oh,
And
nice.
it was a licensing director that I was talking about a little while ago, and
Hmm.
she actually brought the president of the company.
Oh,
And Hakusensha
nice.
is like one of the four largest manga publishers in Japan,
Hmm.
so it's not an insignificant thing. And for them to just kind of show up, and they actually showed up to our booth, and they were there
Nice.
specifically taking pictures of Crab and Maiden
Hmm.
Railways and some of the merchandise that we had made for Crab, and they were so proud by the fact that we were able to discover, or at least bring out, a talent that was so important to them, because they were looking at Pampanya in the same type of way in Japan as well. Like, they did all these flourishes and they didn't just release it like another one of their manga.
Hmm.
They took the time and took the risk to try to put something out like that. And they've been working with them very closely, basically releasing a book every year since then.
Yeah.
We're a much smaller business, so we're not doing that. We
Yeah.
have licensed a number of his works, and we're kind of getting to them. They're not easy.
Is the goal to eventually get all of Pampanya's catalog under your belt,
Most of
or?
it, yeah.
Hmm.
There's some stuff that he published independently that it's a little trickier, but
Hmm.
mostly because the business partner that he worked with has some control over that. But yeah, that's the objective. We don't know what's going to happen, obviously, but
Hmm. And I know
we
that license like contracts last quite a long time. So.
Not really, actually. Most of
Oh, okay.
them, just to be frank,
Hmm.
every contract is different, but the vast majority of them are literally only 3 years long.
Oh, okay.
So,
That's good to
uh,
know.
yeah, but
It's
it's
not
not
as cut
hard.
and dry. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not as hard to renegotiate,
Hmm.
and in many cases, as long as the book is still in print, as long as the book is still selling, as long as neither of the two parties, or in some cases three or four, depending on like a title like Fate or Gundam,
Which has Type
every
Moon on top of everything.
exactly, or
Yeah.
Sunrise,
Hmm.
exactly. As long as all parties are okay, in certain cases there's just automatic renewal if the book is still in print.
Yeah.
So, um,
Speaking of the Type Moon Amiya family, you mentioned that I believe this was back in 2018 or
mhm.
2019 that it was the third bestseller of your catalog.
Mm.
Does that still hold true now in
Yeah,
2023?
yeah, definitely. It's still, Kaiji, what you call it,
Inside
Inside
Mari?
Mari,
Hmm.
yeah, and Emiya Family. But right next to Emiya Family, it's the girl with the Sanpaku eyes
Nice,
for us right
nice.
now. So, and then immediately after that, right now, it's Vampires, which is a very new title for us. Just to go back to the original topic and
Yes,
trying to tie back into March Comes In Like a Lion.
of course.
Yeah, having that relationship and having them be very happy with us and very curious about what we plan on doing even in the future. When I were to go meet them for licensing meetings, eventually the conversation turned away from just me asking for the availability of titles, but they were
Hmm.
also pitching specific books to me.
Got
And
it.
one of the titles that they brought up to me was March Comes In Like a Lion. They specifically felt that the way that we approached manga would work best for that series.
Hmm.
And what is very unique and very special about that relationship is, it's not as if Hakusensha doesn't work with Dark Horse, because Dark Horse publishes Berserk, and they
Hmm.
do a lot of special things with that.
With
The
the
Berserk
deluxes
hardcovers
and
and everything
yeah,
like that. Yeah,
everything. Yeah.
it's not as if they don't work with Viz, and Viz is the largest manga publisher in the U.S.
Hmm.
They're one of the largest manga publishers in the world, actually, at this point, and they've done dozens and dozens and dozens of titles with them, mostly in the shoujo realm, but in even other comics as well. And it's not as if they haven't worked with other people like Seven Seas or Yen Press. But
Hmm.
for whatever reason, and in my opinion, it is those relationships that we have created, they specifically saved that series
For
for
something
us.
special.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because they wanted something special.
Hmm.
And when that opportunity came up, my response was, we're super new, and I wish I could just take this on right now, but
Yeah.
this wasn't even more than a year of us having released books yet. But I said, give me a little bit of time, and if you're patient with me, we'll get to it. And eventually we did. We did acquire that license. And the fun thing is that now it's been a little bit of time after the pandemic, or
Hmm.
the most troubling parts of the pandemic, I should say.
Yeah,
Obviously people are still getting sick, and I don't want
for
to
sure. Yeah,
ignore that fact, but
of course.
at the same time, we're not seeing the same level of disruption relative to that. Um,
Society has somewhat leveled back into
yeah.
not pre, but to a new normal, essentially.
And because of that, we're able to kind of get back to a schedule.
Hmm.
It's not the most ideal, unfortunately, because we do have a lot of things in our back catalog that we need to finish. Some of that being Kaiji, some of that
Hmm.
being a little bit of Emiya.
Yeah, because with
Uh,
Kaiji, I believe it was a total of 5 that you wanted to release, six, and
Yeah.
you're 3 right now, right?
Yep,
Okay,
we sent off volume 4 to the printer already, so yeah, we're gonna be
nice,
we've actually started working on volume 6 already, but
nice.
five is gonna be in pre-press pretty soon. But yeah, so we still have a number of series that we need to get through, and some other series that we actually haven't even started
Mhm.
because of all these delays. But thankfully, March is now in that rotation, kind of taking over in a way the space that we had for Inside Mari, which we ended at the end of 2022 as well. So yeah, a lot of cool things that we have options for with that. We can't really discuss that in
Of
public
course.
yet because of contracts and the like. But
Hmm. And I know
um,
that you've recently gotten proofs for it on Valentine's Day. I
mhm.
saw the
Yeah,
tweet, so
exactly.
love
Yes.
to see that. Showing
Yeah.
love
Yeah.
for it.
Yeah. So yeah, under those circumstances, what we wanted to do with that was show the fan base who've been waiting for that book for
Hmm.
so long at this point. It's been, I think, almost a year and a half since we announced that it's real. It's in process. At this point, it's not even in our hands. We're literally waiting for those books to arrive.
Arrive, yeah.
So
And then they'll hopefully come out either later at the end of this month or early April, correct? Was that the timeline or?
yeah. Right now, the timeline is looking like it's going to be. We'll be getting books for ourselves and for our DM sales that we do
Hmm.
on over Twitter. We'll be getting those books by the end of this month, and then
Awesome.
the books that are going to bookstores should be actually right now. It looks like it's about mid-April, so it'll possibly show up like either end of April in
Hmm.
stores or beginning of May. But we're
Sounds
very
good.
close at this point.
That's awesome to hear. I know there is still no announcement for like season 3 or anything. Is that something like the anime tie-in, something that you think about when you do acquire? Because I know Heavenly Delusion is coming out
Yeah.
in an anime next
Mm,
month.
yeah, not really, to be honest. Like,
Hmm.
in regards to March, as I mentioned just a couple minutes ago,
Yeah.
that was something that was approached to us. And honestly, like under normal circumstances, we wouldn't pick up a title that long.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
that's
a
fair.
it's a very long commitment, and
Hmm.
we're like I'll keep on repeating this. We're only 4 people,
Yeah.
so doing even more than a couple of books a month is a challenge right now. But so we weren't really actively pursuing something like that. We were very happy that it was given to us.
Hmm.
But in the case of Heavily Delusion, we acquired that title before a book had even been released in Japan.
Oh wow, nice.
That's how impressed we were with the
Yeah, and it
story.
won the award in 2018, which is right around where you
Yes,
guys started up as well. So
exactly.
like
Yeah, yeah,
perfect segue into adding
yeah.
into your catalog.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to what I was saying before. We're looking for important artists. We're not
Hmm.
necessarily looking for the trendiest or the top selling manga. Even though March is definitely an example of that. But at the same time, we know that Viz Media and Kodansha and to an extent like Seven Seas are going to be able to pick up some of those titles. It's not as if we're not going to go after them if they don't fit for us, but
Hmm.
anime tie-ins aren't necessarily our priority in any type of capacity. We
Got it.
don't necessarily look at that. However, yeah, it is kind of cool to be able to see, like you said, Heavy Delusion getting an anime. The anime for Under Ninja just got announced
Hmm.
recently, and the dates for that are now public. It looks like it's going to be October of this year. The anime for Emiya Family came out not long after we launched Emiya Family
Oh
2,
yeah,
which
that's
was kind of
true.
fun.
Hmm.
And
Did
when we
that
brought
lead to a boost in sales? Because I know a lot of people talk about how the anime
Hmm.
increases the sales. Does it really impact it from your end?
Yeah, actually, it does. What's funny and a little frustrating about that at the same time is that
Hmm.
it really depends on where it's streaming, also.
That is fair. That is fair.
Because if it's on a platform that really nobody uses or isn't conducive to, anime fans.
Like, for example, Heavenly Delusion is gonna be Disney Plus, but
Yeah.
for release for English, it's up in the airs on exactly
Exactly. Yeah.
when it'll come out.
Yeah, we have no clue when, we have no clue how it's going to be on Disney Plus.
Mhm.
And we really don't know what the viewership
Will
for
be.
anime is on Disney Plus.
Yeah,
It's
that's
very
fair.
different from Crunchyroll. It's very different
Crunchyroll or
from
Netflix or
Netflix.
Hulu
Yeah.
simulcast, yeah,
Right,
exactly.
right. Or High Dive, I guess, and then
Mhm.
Amazon. So yeah, we don't know how that's going to turn out. But at least in the case of like Emiya Family, when that was an anime, that was a little different from some of the other series that we see adapted because it was like an episode a month
Mhm.
instead of once every week for a little while. We did see a nice little rolling boil for that, but where things got a lot more intense was when we brought over Ta as a guest to the States.
Mhm.
We brought her to Anime NYC 2019, if I remember correctly, and then as Fate Grand Order, the video game started to just grow and grow and grow. That also helped quite a bit too. So just the fact that the Fate ecosystem
It
is
just speeds up,
huge.
yeah, and
Yeah,
it's such so many entries that
exactly.
constantly
Yeah,
generate interest in all across,
yeah,
and
yeah.
especially with Emiya Family, which is so much more of a different tone than the seriousness or the
Mm,
action-packedness, but using the same characters definitely gives people an
yeah,
option to
exactly.
pick for it.
Right. Yeah.
Speaking of Heavenly Delusion and more on like digital releases, I know on your
Mm,
website it's more of an integrated reader now, and that was something that you had not known back in 2019, 2018, how you would
mm,
incorporate digital. Could you
mm.
talk about how your reader works?
We're gonna
To
see if
like,
it's working again because it
yeah.
hasn't been working recently.
Oh, has it
But
been down? Oh no.
it's been down. It's been up and down since about October, unfortunately.
I
It's,
bought the Heavenly Delusion Volume 1 just to test
yep,
out,
yep. That
and
that
it
should still
worked
work.
perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, it worked perfectly
Uh,
fine.
yeah, new uploads. I don't know if it's just a data issue on our back end or
Mhm.
something. I don't deal with the IT at all,
Yeah,
but new uploads as I said, around September, October, most of those don't have not been working properly
got it.
for some reason. But what I will say is, yeah, in our case, we're sister companies with Faku, who's an era manga publisher, and they helped set up some of the tech for actually all of the tech for the reader. They have a pretty robust one on their side with a lot of interesting functionality.
Mhm.
You can adjust pagination, so if you want to read right to left or left to right,
Yeah,
or vertical scroll, and you can also migrate things from desktop to mobile relatively easily. One thing
I
that
have
they
not tried
do,
that. I need to try
yeah,
that then.
yeah.
Yeah.
One thing that they also do with the ebooks is that they upload them at actually higher than print quality, which is kind of, in my opinion, it's a little ridiculous. But
Like, upscaling the quality, is that what you're talking about? Or
well,
would it be considered
the
upscaling?
not exactly. So they export
Mhm.
the files at a DPI that's even higher than or at a resolution that's higher than print. Print is
Uh-huh.
usually around 1600
Okay.
DPI, and the files that we have on the web reader are usually at 3200 DPI.
Mm.
What's unique about that in regards to ebooks too is if you were to go to say Apple or Kindle or Nook, or mostly because we're dealing with visual media and
Mhm.
there's a bandwidth concern there. Many of those companies will downgrade those ebook files to something that's a little easier to transfer.
Got it. Yeah, to compress it down. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Mhm.
So a lot of those files tend to be between 1200 to sometimes even 800 DPI. That
Mhm.
doesn't really impact things too much visually,
Yeah.
but if you're really into high fidelity, like
Yeah.
like
I
some
mean,
like some people are,
for me, I like
mix.
to read on the biggest screen I can possibly
Mm,
get, so it definitely appreciate the extra detail there.
yeah. So yeah, we try to have the stuff up there actually specifically for the ebooks when it was working. Also, a little bit ahead of time relative to the print editions.
Mhm.
Obviously, we have those files already. Those are
Yeah.
the files that we send off to the printer. So,
Mhm.
or something similar. Generally speaking. if people who go onto the site when it's working properly, can get those ebooks usually as early as maybe a month in advance of
Oh wow.
on sale date. So I will say that for the most part, users and sales that way are not that significant for us,
It's just another option. So like
but
if
it is
people
another
don't want to
option.
do print, they have the digital one within your own native
Hmm.
website.
Exactly, yeah.
Got
And
it.
I feel, especially looking at how the readership, the fan base has been interacting with the publishers over the last couple of years. A number of them are trying, have stated that they would prefer more of that focus to be without a middleman.
Yeah,
And if they're if they buy something from Amazon, Amazon's going to take a cut. If they do that same thing on Apple or Google, there's always going to be this middleman transaction. And in the
exactly.
case of working with us, that gets you a lot closer to working directly with the author. So,
Hmm.
and in some cases, say for example, with two of the shorts we did, specifically with Shuzo Oshimi, like that's a very close transaction where we're working directly with Oshimi too. So, there's no even middleman of a publisher in Japan under some of those situations. So that brings up those opportunities for a much closer relationship as well.
Which is awesome to hear because you were, from my understanding, the reason why we have Oshimi in the West during your time at Vertical, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Back then, I took a chance on Oshimi. That's a really interesting story too, because it was around the time that Vertical was getting purchased by Kodansha. I think it was really early days in that transition, and we were offered to. No, actually, we were initially offered Attack on Titan,
Yeah.
which in hindsight would have been a better decision. I want to say,
Yeah.
but
No, that's
but at
fair.
this yeah, but at the same time, like myself and most of the people in the Vertical office, we actually liked another story in that same magazine, manga magazine, Shonen Magazine Monthly, and that was Flowers of Evil.
Yeah.
So responded to Kodansha about that, and they were like, "Okay, well, this title's doing okay too, but we'll see what we can do about Titan." And obviously, Kodansha USA did that.
Yeah.
But what was very fun for us was, at least for those first 2 or 3 volumes of Flowers of Evil was outselling Attack on Titan
Wow.
by a lot. It was Flowers of Evil was actually a New York Times bestseller before Attack on Titan ever
Oh my
was.
goodness.
And what was also very interesting was, as soon as the anime debuted on Crunchyroll and Funimation at
Hmm.
the time, almost within 3 weeks, yeah, Attack on Titan was the largest manga in modern histories at that time.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting situation too, because like in a way we were proven right by taking a chance on someone new, but you often never know how things are going to turn out, especially when you have those situations about having an anime.
I mean, and
Yeah.
Attack on Titan season one, which came out, I believe, like 2013, around that time.
Yep.
Yeah, like it blew up to
Yeah,
say the
yeah, it blew up.
least.
Yeah, and it was actually like one of the drivers of like the current manga industry right now.
Hmm.
Like manga was in a pretty dark place, like the early teens. The
Which
manga
is
industry.
generally around where I got in because I
Mm,
started reading Vinland Saga around
mm,
2010, 2011. That
mm,
was the first manga that I read. So,
yeah.
and like
So
back
around.
then, I think the only books that you could find in the library, like my local library, was like Naruto volumes
Right.
or
Yep.
something like that.
Yeah, and there were only a handful of publishers at the time. Del Rey had shut down, and Kodansha had taken over, and Viz was still around, but Tokyopop was gone, and ADV was gone, Bandai
Hmm.
was gone. A number of publishers just disappeared around 2008 to 2010. For those 2 or 3 years, it was tough, and titles like Titan
Definitely brought a
definitely
resurgence.
brought things back up. Yeah, but what's interesting is that during ever since then, an artist like Oshimi has just been kind of building up his reputation. There wasn't just Flowers of Evil, but Happiness came out, and Blood on the Tracks, and obviously
Is
we're doing
currently, yeah.
Mari. Yeah,
Hmm.
and all of those titles have just kind of built up, his prestige and
His
his
style, yeah, he's
yeah.
really like from Blood on the Tracks, and like that's the one that I've read for sure, and I want to get into the other stuff, especially since you at Denpa cherish Oshimi. So I want to get into Inside Mari and Flowers of Evil and Happiness, because I've seen a couple screenshots like online, especially the one spread in Flowers of Evil in the classroom. Like that's a beautiful spread, and I don't have any of the context for it, but
Right.
even without the
Yeah.
context, it's just
Yeah, it's
beautiful to
still
look
really
at.
impactful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I were to start on Oshimi outside of Blood on the Tracks, would you recommend me going to Flowers of Evil first, or starting with like something like Inside Mari instead?
Yeah, I would say in a way Inside Mario would be a better starting point. There he has things that are older that are now available.
Yeah.
Those things like Avant-Garde and a couple other older titles, Sweet Pool Paradise. Those works are interesting, but Oshimi had not really gotten to the point of being like, oh, I can write a story. It
Yeah.
was more visual.
Uh-huh.
This is definitely a part of Oshimi, but it was very horny.
Yeah, no, I mean that's fair.
And there was a lot of like emotional frustration that he was putting on the page, and
Mhm.
that's actually very important to see. But once you get to Mari, he has an idea and he really works through figuring it out
Right.
while he writes it all out. There are a lot of little twists and turns in that book, and a
Mhm.
lot of people see it in very different ways. Like it's
Okay.
interesting for me to see reviews of it now that it's done and see how people LGBT community look at it, how people within like the rom-com community look at that, how
Mhm.
people think it's like a body swap type of title,
Yeah.
how some people think it's horror or even describe it as sci-fi sometimes.
Okay.
It's in some ways it could be all of those things, but
The
but
fact that it has so many lenses to be approached
exactly,
upon.
yes, yeah. Actually, a really good way to describe it, to be honest.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's a little more complicated than I'd say Flowers of Evil.
Yeah.
Flowers of Evil is just a lot of passion, and it's very much a lot more tied to like what he was doing earlier, but just done in a stronger way. Like he just kind of figured out like what his strengths were, and he tried to go back and really focus on the struggles of youth.
Mhm.
And I think that's where like Happiness builds off of, and also Blood on the Tracks. So where you start to get like that really heavy moody elements. And the best thing about it too, after you read Mari
Mhm.
and then you go to Flowers of Evil, there are a lot of really impactful frames and panels and sometimes spreads in Mari. If you read Flowers of Evil afterwards,
Yes.
the ratio of those type of moments is so much higher that you'll just be like, oh yes, I
Got
know
it.
he drew them around the same time,
Uh-huh.
but like Flowers of Evil was just so much more precise under those circumstances. So
Mhm.
like you just see him evolving in the process, and I think that's a
Got it.
better like attitude to take it. Just start off with Mari, learn about how he is, and then
Mhm.
you know
And
see
then
how he
see it
develops.
how
Yeah.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
that makes total sense. Speaking of Flowers of Evil, and you mentioned earlier how licenses don't last that long or contracts don't
Mm,
last that long. I know that Flowers of Evil and Happiness, from like some of the people that I watch for like manga collectors on
mm,
YouTube, that's the only reason I actually heard about Invitation from a Crab. It was from someone's collection. I saw
mm,
it, it looked really nice, and I was like, yeah, let me pick it up. And recently read it. That's how like I get some of my recommendations from.
mm,
And I know that some of the singles or the two-in-ones for both of
mm,
those are really hard to find. Would
mhm.
that be an option for Denpa to pick up a license to reprint that?
Yeah, that's a really thoughtful type of question. And under normal circumstances, I would say there's always a possibility.
Yeah.
But what makes it a little complicated with, say, those specific titles or most of Oshimi's catalog
Hmm.
is that now he's primarily working with Kodansha in Japan. And for a
Got it.
while, he was working with a number of different artists, different publishers, I should say. So he was working for Tabasha for a little while.
Hmm.
He was working with Shodansha for a little while. It's funny because Shodansha is mostly a josei manga publisher. And then for a little while, he was working with Oda Books, which does very high art indie style works. So
Hmm.
that's where we got Shino say her name
Got
from.
it. Yeah.
Because most of his works these days are with Kodansha, and Kodansha has an American imprint.
It'll probably go
It,
down that line, if anything.
yeah, it
Yeah.
is not in. It's not necessarily in Kodansha's best interest for them to let go of an artist that they've
Hmm.
already released. Once again, I will say you never know. Having worked for them
Yeah.
and kind of in some ways set the tone for how they do licensing, because I was
Hmm.
actually their first manga licenser for Vertical.
And I know that you were the one that introduced like seasons of licensing, like listing out. I know
Yeah,
a lot of
yeah, Jesus,
publishers
yeah. It's funny that
nowadays
people
on
remember that.
Twitter.
Yeah.
Yeah. They like
Yeah,
release like a couple months in advance,
yeah,
like
yeah,
dumping it every 10
yeah.
minutes, which I want to hear from your perspective. It's
Mm,
interesting in the moment when it happens, but
mm.
a lot of them don't have pre-orders until months later.
Right, yeah.
Does it actually kill the hype or the interest around those licenses if they're announced too early?
Yes.
Hmm.
But it really depends. And the frustrating thing about that is, and this is something that the reader doesn't really know too much about. One of the reasons why I started doing those things seasonally was because that's how I needed to pitch those same books to bookstores.
Oh, okay.
And bookstore sales, we pitch them. This will be very frustrating to the listener, but they're usually pitched 12 to 16 months in
Oh,
advance.
wow.
So basically that means that you acquire a license usually around 2 years before you ever see a book.
Hmm.
And at least in some cases. So
I mean, just speaking from March, right, that you've had that in
yeah.
talks at least for almost 3 years or even longer now,
We've
right?
we've talked about it for almost at least 4 years now.
Yeah.
We've been discussing it.
Hmm.
We've had that license, yeah, for about two years,
Hmm.
almost exactly 2 years. Yeah, almost exactly 2 years right now. And we held off to announce it until that summer. But yeah, like and it's not to say that if it wasn't because of the pandemic and some other issues, Volume One would have come out a little while ago. I wouldn't say a long time ago, but
Yeah,
I'd
but
say
at least a
maybe
little earlier. Yeah.
yeah, it
Hmm.
possibly around fall of last year, just to be realistic. Yeah, it sucks for the fan because they do get hyped in the moment, and unfortunately, publishing is a very slow thing.
Hmm.
Particularly printing. From the time that we send books to the printer, say for example, yeah, like March Volume One, we sent those things out December, and we
Hmm.
didn't get proofs until February.
Oh,
So that's
wow.
2 months
Yeah. And you
and we
guys
won't
send
get
it to China, right? Correct? Is that correct? So
uh
that's where you do
the
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 printing or
the majority of our books are actually printed in Chicago.
oh,
So yeah, if you open up say Crab, you'll see that it says printed in the US on the
oh yeah.
copyright page.
Yes.
Yeah, March is one of
Oh yeah, it does. Yeah.
yeah. We started getting a lot of delays here in the US because of the pandemic, and
Hmm.
it's still not ideal with our printers here in the States. People don't want to necessarily work in factories anymore.
Yeah, that's fair.
So some of our new books, March, Under Ninja, Vampires, and actually all of our full color books, except
Hmm.
for Sampaku, are printed in China. So
Got it.
that's not to say that all of our books are going to be printed over there, but it's ironically becoming, well, for a little while it had become faster to print in China even with all the shipping
Yeah.
time, because we were seeing delays here in the US of like 6 to 8 months
Oh wow.
that we would send files in before
And
we
is
could see the
that
books.
more of like a mix of both, like the circumstances as well as just increased demand in like physical manga
Yeah,
or
that I mean, the demand is something that we don't get to hear about because the printers aren't going to tell us, oh yeah, Viz has sent us, a billion reprints and we don't
yeah.
prioritize you
Uh-huh.
because you're small. But we do think that that is a little bit of an issue. It's this last part that I'm about to share didn't necessarily hit us until very recently,
Hmm.
and I'm sure you're familiar. But towards the latter half of last year, we here in the states started talking about or hearing about inflation
Oh
and things like
yes,
that.
yes.
And because of those circumstances, that was the first time that we heard about. just, oh, some of the paper that Denpa uses is not available because we're prioritizing those for other publishers. And if you say, for example, once you can pick up that copy of Crab, you'll notice that the paper color is not white; it's
No, it isn't.
cream.
And you guys specifically pick cream paper
Yes,
for your physicals.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and specifically because that is the color that is used in Japan.
Oh, okay.
And then also it's easier on the eyes, and that's what novels are generally printed off of.
Hmm.
So what ended up happening to us towards the end of the year was, yeah, as there's always like much larger publishers, whether it's Random House or Macmillan or whatever. Going
Hmm.
towards the end of the year is usually like a big time for people to buy books as
Yeah,
gifts.
for holidays or something like
Exactly.
that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
So they were prioritizing like regular novels over us, and we had to find different sources for the paper. One of them was
makes sense.
China.
Got it. Makes sense. I know that March with this is for volume 12, so this is
Mm.
well down the line.
Yeah, it's a couple
Well
years
down
from
the
now.
line,
Yeah.
yeah, a couple years from now. But in Japan, it had a release with a short story by Nishio
Mm.
Isen, who I know that you were involved in with the
Yes.
Faust ones, right?
Yeah.
When Nishio Isen got published here in the US.
Mm.
So I know that he did a crossover short story
Mm.
with Sangatsu or March Comes in Like a Lion
Mm.
that has Kiriyama and one of the characters in the Monogatari series,
Mm.
Hanekawa. So I was wondering if obviously like there is no answer that's totally understandable, but is that something
Mm.
that you might consider doing a special edition from, or is that not feasible with the types? Because I know normally with like
Mm.
special editions it's usually like a single volume or an art book
Mm.
like Future Log or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Uh, yeah, it's really too early to
Yeah.
say. But in regards to things like that, if the rights are available, we're
Hmm.
more likely than not going to inquire about it. I preface that by saying if the licenses are available, and
Yeah.
where that gets tricky is that's a situation where obviously the original manga is Chica Umino's, but you
Yeah,
have someone else creating something for her, and
exactly.
in some circumstances, those authors may not sign off on it. So,
Hmm.
but if we have access to those type of things, that's the one thing about Denpa. I feel that if we can reach it, we will
Hmm.
almost always go after it.
Of course.
But it may not be available. Like there are currently little things that we've been looking into, actually specifically in regards to what you're talking about, not Nishio Ishin,
Hmm. But
but
like those
there
crossover type.
exactly that
Hmm.
we've been looking into, and some of those things are unfortunately unavailable because of those additional license holders. So
Got it. Well, I mean,
yeah.
the fact that you're even looking into it is more than enough, right? Of
Mm,
course, if it's out of your hand, it's out of your hand. There's nothing
yeah,
you can do
yeah,
about it.
but
Yeah.
we always try to when we can.
That's good. Speaking of like other editions, I know that like some other publishers, like in Spain, which you've helped set up in
Mm,
other countries, have like other versions, like with
mm,
Witch Hat Atelier has different
mm,
covers that are designed
mm.
by the author. Is that also a potential possibility, or is that something specific to
Yeah.
like the Spain publishing industry?
Yeah. Well, we've actually, so yes and no.
Hmm.
So what I would say about that is we've actually done alternative covers, but I guess it's because because we were so new at the time that people just didn't know that they existed.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
for example, there are alternative covers for Crab and Super Dimensional Love Gun
Oh, okay.
that were available for a couple years. We would sell those at conventions as well as on our social media sales. But
Hmm.
so what I would say about that is that's not to say that we won't be doing more of those things, but
Hmm.
the scale is definitely not going to be like we're going to be making a full run
Yeah,
the
because that's
same
not
size.
that's not feasible
Yeah, it's
for
just not
exactly.
feasible.
Yeah. No, that's totally understandable.
Especially for a group as small as us, like we
Mhm.
really don't have that type of money.
Yeah.
So, and even, there's no promises or anything like that, but we've been
Mhm.
already even discussing those things internally for things like March as well. But
Nice.
we'll, we never know where that's going to go,
Yeah,
but
we'll see
we've
how
definitely
it
thought
goes.
about
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
exactly. Speaking of like some like future plans in general, you talked about community surveys and how it wasn't really that
Mm,
feasible in
mm,
2019, but is that something now that you have a bigger catalog and hopefully
mm.
bigger sales, would that be something you want to incorporate and how would you incorporate that?
Wanna is yes, but
Mhm.
I don't think we can right now. It's the our biggest hurdle is the fact that yeah, we're just still so small,
Mhm.
and my issue right now is I need to get to the point where we're selling enough and we have like some actual hits. Not to say we don't have titles that sell because
Yeah.
Kaiji is doing really well and Emi is doing really well. Mari was doing well, but now that series is
Now
over.
that it's done, yeah.
Yeah,
The ones I wanna collect. I mean, I'll
yeah.
definitely pick up Mario so I can
Mm.
read it, but yeah.
We need more titles of like that type of capacity, and March is hopefully going to be one. Looks like
Mhm.
Vampires and Under Ninja are doing okay,
Yeah.
but the thing with that is we still don't have enough financial resource to hire a lot more staff, which would also mean license a lot more.
Yeah.
So because of that, and ironically, March kind of impacts us in a negative way in
Because
this
it's a
matter.
long running series, but
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. So
And
now
usually
we're
there's diminishing returns as you
yeah
I'm not sure if you experience it yet because
yeah
most of your catalog is like Inside Mari is probably your longest one, right? At 10
yes yep
volumes. So was there a like drop
at
in
9.
sales as you get to the end or
For Mari, not so much, which is great.
Mhm.
Thankfully, you know, we're definitely at a time where there is like a little bit of a manga boom happening, though
Yeah.
that's slowing down. But say, for example, for things that are a little more challenging, like say Pleasure and Corruption, which also just ended, that
Yeah.
saw a significant drop off. That wasn't helped by the fact that it was deplatformed by Amazon,
Oh my
but
goodness. Was
but
it because of
outside,
the content
yeah,
or
it was because of the
because I know
content.
it was like, my friend really likes the series and I told him, "Hey, like Denpa published it." So he went and bought Pleasure and Corruption, but no,
Mm.
I did not know that about
Yeah,
Amazon.
it does really well at Barnes Noble, which is ironic because people
That's
can
cool.
go in person and see and
Yeah,
see
and
the
flip
same
through it.
stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, there was a decline for that. It wasn't. It didn't kill the series by any means. It does make it a little bit more challenging for us to be like, you know, what are we going to do with it now that it's done? Under those circumstances, it's not as if once again we don't think March is going to fall off a cliff. We
Yeah,
we're
no,
pretty
that's
confident that title is going to do okay. But
mhm.
even just the fact that it is, you know, 17 volumes, that basically means that every 4 months or every 5 months, which is what our schedule is right now,
Yeah.
that slot is going to be taken by that title. And
Yeah.
we are only doing about two, maybe three books a month right now, including the Kuma books. So
Mhm. So the
if there's only
potential options for
exactly,
release is getting
it's
limited
already
because of that.
small to
Yeah.
begin with. So if that's just, if we're devoting that amount of resource for the next essentially, you know, 5 years or so,
Mhm.
that means that we can't license anything that's of that length or even half of that length really.
No,
So
that makes total sense.
and where our focus under those circumstances is going to be, and actually, you know, I've actually held off on announcing licenses for a little while.
Mhm.
We've announced stuff for Kuma, the Boys Love line. That was pretty easy because most of their titles are one shots, so one volume releases. But for Denpa, I don't think we've announced anything since last summer. And while I do have about 5 or 6 licenses on hold right now,
Mhm.
most of them are short, like 1 or 2 volumes. And yeah, like I'm not gonna mention them publicly until we're pretty close to like, okay, we're gonna
We
start
have a
working on
slot for it.
exactly,
We can
yeah.
get to yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and part of that is also, you know, going back to what you were talking about earlier too. Like we don't want to disappoint people too much and have them
Mhm.
be in a situation where like, hey, you guys announced this 2 years ago.
Yeah,
What's
it's like a
happening?
weird limbo state
Yeah,
essentially, yeah.
and what's frustrating about that for not just for the customers, it's also a little frustrating for us too. Is that like if we present that to Barnes and Noble or Amazon and like they'll take that information and just post it immediately. So
Oh, okay.
we have to hold off as well.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's one of those weird catch 22s where like you can't really show your cards until like you're really ready, to be honest.
Mhm.
And
And I
and this is some
definitely understand because the series that I mainly cover on my
Mm,
channel is Hoseki no Kuni or Land of the Lustrous, and
mm,
when I make like offhand mentions of ideas or something, the audience expects a video of that to
mm,
come out soon when the
mm,
production for like a big project might take maybe up to 3 months. Like there's a project
mm,
that I'm releasing next month, or actually
mm,
now that it's March, this month, that people have been waiting for a couple months, and that
mm.
built up anticipation kind of has a negative effect.
Yeah. It's a little weird too because I don't know if it happens as much as it used to.
Hmm.
I remember in the early teens, it was really common for people to scrape places like Amazon or even some library websites to try to find new licenses, or new announcements and new release dates and things like
Oh,
that.
interesting.
Um,
Oh, because they put up like the pre-order page
yeah,
for like the
exactly.
volume or something like that.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah. But
I
so
definitely did that
sometimes,
for Land of the Illustrious. I wanted
yeah,
to know when the volume 12 was, and
right,
whenever they put it up, they keep changing the date, so it's
right.
not set in stone, but yeah.
Yeah. So there were situations back then where, yeah, even if a publishing house wanted to do like a special thing to announce a license, yeah, a retailer may
Mhm.
have leaked the stuff in advance.
Yeah,
So that
which is
even makes
tough.
it even more, awkward because you can't even have that win, of
Yeah,
having the excitement with the
exactly.
fans. But
And for a lot of your licenses, do you I know that you've talked about how saying it in a convention or something like that when there's
mm,
physical people there that are
mm,
building in that anticipation is so
mm,
much better than just doing it over a tweet or maybe a YouTube
mm.
announcement or something where there isn't that physicality.
Yeah. Yeah, I prefer that myself. It's
Mhm.
just that's a matter of taste, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I like that because I can actually like visually see the reaction, and I'll be frank. There are especially when we were starting, we'd
Mhm.
have panels and they may be 60% full, maybe 50% full, and
Yeah.
be in this, just have a couple hundred people there, but to see those reactions and not like it just be words or
Yeah.
or a couple emoji or something, uh just means a lot to me because all these books also mean a lot to me. We put in a lot of work into these things. And then on top of that, more often than not, because we are accessible in that type of way, it's not uncommon for people to go to the booth or even up to the stage after the panel's over and ask
Mhm.
questions about like, oh wow, this is, how did this happen? And why did you guys do this and things like
Yeah.
that? Or like how are you gonna present this? Those are moments that you can kind of share and get like an even deeper appreciation for what the fans want,
Mhm.
because they're like feeling it out themselves. So,
Yeah.
and sure, someone can obviously write to us or DM us, write us an email or something, but because you're not face to face with somebody, you have to wait for them for that response, right? and
Exactly. Yeah.
and the reaction is in some ways a little stilted. I feel that just having that face to face personal touch adds a lot more to that experience. And I do want all of our readers to feel that not just our books, but just Denpa as a whole is an experience that people should want to share. I
No.
don't think that people feel that way, but that is how I would like
I
like
think
like for the reader to be like.
it comes more of similar to like anime versus anime studios
Mm,
and manga publishers. People focus on the series itself
mm,
and don't actually think about like other than the author, who else makes it possible for this to
mm,
be in front of me. And I
mm,
think there is slightly a shift, and like I'm taking a more active shift in looking up creators that aren't just the
mm,
author or people that are involved in it. So like this is
mm,
my journey or my process of
mm-hmm,
getting more familiar with it. So hopefully that leads to more of a shift in either my audience or just the audience in general.
mm. No, I appreciate it.
What is your work routine look like as a publisher? Or is it different from every day to day? Is there no, like, set, like,
Uh,
day? Yeah.
yeah, for the well, that's something that's not too hard to describe. But I will say that it is very boring.
That's okay, I like
So
boring.
yeah, yeah.
I like a structured,
Okay.
very boring schedule. It lets me it gives me some sense of, like, stability. if
Yeah,
that's what you're talking about. Yeah.
yeah. Unfortunately, stability is not a part, not so much a part of it,
Yeah.
but it's just it is just a lot of like grunt work. But
Mhm.
so in my case, uh, I wear a few hats here. You know, I'm the president and publisher. So I also do some of the editorial, do a little bit of the translation, I take care of sales. Pardon me, I do a
Mhm.
little bit of the marketing. I'm the person in charge of handling the distributors for us. I do the licensing. Obviously, there's only four of us, so I take care of like staffing and office management.
You guys are located in, Portland,
Portland,
Oregon?
Oregon.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, a lot of my day is kind of managing all of those tasks to an
Mhm.
extent, but I don't do every one of those things every day. So I usually get in around 11 or so, go through email. Generally speaking, I get a lot of email in the morning from Japan, and I have to respond to them.
Yeah, because they have been up for
Yes,
a
yeah,
while at that
yes.
point, yeah,
So
because of the
around the
time
time that
zone.
I get in, they're usually shutting down for the day,
Mhm.
for the following day,
Got
which
it,
is
yep.
a little interesting. And yeah, so I send them responses if I have them. That they're my priority in the morning. So then once they get into the office, which is usually around like 6 p.m. their time,
Mhm.
6 p.m. my time,
Got it, yeah, yeah.
they'll open up those things and then get me a response before they leave. And
So
that
you get
cycle just kind
almost
of
2
continues.
different waves of emails,
Yes,
essentially. Yeah.
yes. And that's dealing with Japan. Then after that, if it's Monday, I look at the sales figures for the previous week.
Mhm.
And that's usually about 2 hours worth because it's not just we sell through so many retailers and it's not just North America, but we do the UK as well,
Mhm.
and a little bit of Australia, New Zealand. That's not a lot of sales, but
Yeah.
that because of the different channels, it does take a little bit of time. And then after that, I do editorial. I split it up a couple of ways. It's a little easier for me to take care of some of the QC for Faku. So I do editorial for Faku for usually an hour
Mhm.
each day. That's usually about maybe a quarter of a book for them. They release a book every 2 weeks. And then after that, I will look at what stage in editing either a Kuma book is or a Denpa book is. So
Mhm.
if it's an early stage, so Kuma usually goes through around 4 to 5, sometimes 6 rounds of editing. If it's really early, I will go through it really quickly, but I wouldn't prioritize it because there's usually another editor looking at those books.
Mhm.
If it's a Denpa book and it's the early stage, I will grind on that because that's when I'm mostly doing like mostly focusing on the translation to make sure the translation is correct.
In regards to the translations,
Mm.
for any of the releases, maybe not even Denpa, but back in your days at Vertical, was there a time where you got not the greatest quality of the raws or
uh,
something, and how you would, like,
yeah, yeah.
polish it up?
Yeah,
Or is that
yeah.
too
That I
broad
mean
of
that.
a
No, no, no. That
Yeah.
does happen. It doesn't happen much these days because like I only work with very specific people now. And
Yeah,
back then, I wasn't the editor in chief, so he would pick
and then
for
send
the
it
first
over
few
to you, yeah.
years. Yeah, he would pick most of those things, and then I would edit. But
Mhm.
eventually, he mostly focused on novels, so then I was doing most of that. Under those circumstances, there's not much you can do because sending things back will get maybe some minor revisions, but the
Mhm.
translator, they have their own writing style and they have their own limitations on how to translate.
Yeah.
So if it's not a good translation and you kind of realize very early on that they're not up to snuff, they're
Mhm.
not going to improve over just one round. Like
Yeah.
it's going to take them five more books, 10 more books, who knows how long,
Mhm.
depending on where their skill level is. So under those circumstances, I've translated a number of books myself. I'll just go in and kind of rewrite, but at the same time, and this is something that I tell my translators as well as my editor, well, more so my editors though, I will very much try to maintain the voice of the translator and obviously of the original source material.
Yeah.
So staying in that mind space when you need to do a real lot of rewrite or revisions is not
Mhm.
very easy. And but yeah, it just has to be done. What happens generally if it's really bad is, yeah, I'll just go through it like really fine tooth comb,
Hmm.
more so than normal. Because if you work with someone that you trust and they're very capable,
And you
you'll
also get
find
a feel of
mistakes
their
here and there.
voice too, right?
Exactly,
So
yeah.
you're accustomed to it.
Yeah, you may find mistakes now and then, but you're not necessarily looking for like, oh dang, every single kanji has to be correct, and like
Yeah.
you're just kind of feeling things out and being like, oh wait, this line doesn't work here. Why doesn't it work? And then you might realize, oh no, they read this wrong.
Hmm.
And that's a little bit more common. But if the translation's bad, generally, yeah, I'll just go through it with a lot of detail, start fixing things to start off, and do that for a couple of rounds, and then go back and add the voice of the translator,
Got it.
because there's almost always one. And
Hmm.
then the later rounds, I try to make sure that the voice of the author, the original author, is maintained. So that's when things are tweaked with a little bit more nuance than originally, and just
So I
start looking
guess
for typos.
in the sake of like, for example, Oshimi, would you go back to his older works to pull in that own voice, or is that more of
At,
an internalization type of
at
thing?
this point, having worked around like 20 books with him, I kind of have
That's
that
something you
in
know.
my
Okay.
head. Yeah,
Yeah.
kind of the same a little bit with like Pampania.
Hmm.
The translator for that, I only have one person working on Pampania, and
Yeah.
I've worked with him on, wow, maybe 40, 50 books now, which is kind
Oh
of
wow.
crazy to
Yeah.
say. Uh, so so yeah, I know his voice and I know how it kind of works with Pampania, and actually I have him work on very specific titles
Hmm.
that I think work for him, and that's kind of
Yeah.
how I select my translators as well. Like I have like a vision of who can tell this story or interpret the story is possibly
Hmm.
a better way to say it. So under those circumstances, yeah, it's a lot easier for me to pull my Oshimi voice just out of my mind, a lot easier than, say, for example, we're just starting with volume 2 of March. I'm not that I've read Chica Umino's works for
Yeah.
2 decades now, but I haven't worked on her works until March. So
Yeah.
um, I'm still getting familiar with how that's working. So I'm looking at volume 1 and going back and forth and back and forth, and be like, okay, just to keep this consistent.
And I didn't notice anything with Crab, but do you add translators like notes at the end of a volume? Is that something that's like common practice
Never,
or no? Okay.
no. We,
Because I only know it because with the Land of the Lustrious, they
mm,
do it, so that's what I'm
yeah,
familiar with, but I don't
yeah.
know if that's common practice.
Yeah, Kodansha does it sometimes. Tokyopop used to do it a lot
Hmm.
before, in the previous iteration of Tokyopop. I don't know if they're
Yeah.
still doing it now with their new stuff. Dark Horse does it sometimes, but in my opinion, and we didn't do this when I was at Vertical either.
Hmm.
I don't like taking the reader out of that moment and having them either go back to the end of the book or
Yeah.
just not describe it in context. So it
Because it
doesn't
breaks the
really,
flow, I guess. Yeah.
exactly, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. It doesn't really pop up too much in something like Crab, but
Yeah.
say for example, yeah, with Kaiji, I know there are a couple moments like that in March, Volume
Yeah,
One.
because I think with March, I just put out a video today to
Hmm.
start the beginning of March,
Hmm.
and something that I wanted to focus on was actually the shogi match itself for the first
Hmm.
chapter or first episode of March
Hmm.
against Masha Chica and Kiriyama, and how it
Hmm.
pulls from one of the older works for shogi.
Hmm.
So I'm not sure. Like, I don't think most
Yeah,
of the
we
fan base or even you guys would put that into it because it would
no.
break that flow
Yeah,
completely. Yeah.
we don't add more context that is necessary.
Hmm.
Not because we don't think it's worth it, but we
But
don't want. Yeah,
it
you're
takes
right.
away from the author's
Exactly. Yeah.
intentionality
That the
of
yeah the
showing it.
author
Yeah.
is not intending for people to be like, oh, what is this referencing?
Yeah.
They're just putting it in there. They know what it may mean.
Hmm.
Um, but uh, but if there are situations like, for example, someone describes, a neighborhood, or they mention a very specific real person, or an event in time that would make sense to somebody in Japan but doesn't make sense to someone outside of Japan. What we will do in many cases is actually describe that point in the dialogue itself.
Got it.
So in the text itself. So the character may say, I don't think we use this example in March 1, but this is just like a hypothetical. If for the first time that the word Dan is used, and Dan being the level of
The player of the shogi. Yeah.
shogi player that you are. If we wanted to describe that, Kiriyama was like, yeah, saying to one of the sisters, I'm a fifth Dan shogi player. We might say, I'm a level 5 Dan shogi player, right? So
Got it. Yeah.
level 5 Dan.
Would give
Instead of
enough
just saying,
context
yeah,
for the reader to pick up on that, not
yeah,
knowing about shogi and the
right.
professional world
Yeah.
of it.
And the reason why we didn't do that is you may be familiar, but in March, after every like 2 or 3 chapters, there's actually an essay by a shogi player
Oh, okay.
who's like
I
who
did not know
provides
that.
consulting to Chica
Mhm.
Umino, and he talks about like the shogi world.
Aspects of it.
Yeah.
Got it.
So
And is that
we
something that have included
oh
into?
yeah,
Okay,
we
perfect.
include, so we allow him to go into those details,
Mhm.
and there are moments though that like some of that context may be too abstract. So under those circumstances, in between the gutters, or if it's on the essays, they'll be at the bottom of the page. We'll have a
Mhm.
little note saying, this is who this person is, or this
Okay.
is where this event happened, or things like that. So,
Nice.
like there's another example. This actually does happen in March at the shogi hall where the most of the games occur.
Mhm.
There's a scroll in the
Oh, in
background.
the back on
Yeah.
the wall. Yeah.
Yes. And it's done in Japanese kanji, but it's
Mhm.
it's really like a Chinese idiom.
Oh, okay.
And we decided not to rewrite it because
Mhm.
it's actually important that it stays like that. So the very first time that it shows up in each volume, we have a little note saying scroll says
Okay.
this.
But then keeps it retained for the rest of the
Exactly.
volume, so
Yes.
at
Yeah.
least you know what you're looking at. Okay,
Exactly. Yeah.
that's a
Because it
perfect
does
middle
show
ground.
up like almost every match. They'll be in the background,
Mhm.
especially if it's at the shogi hall. And
Yeah, I remember it from the anime, especially because I
yeah.
was rewatching episode 1. Yeah,
Yeah,
that definitely
and
pops up.
it is kind of important, especially in the first volume, because if you take what that is saying and the
Mhm.
way that Kiriyama has to kind of settle himself, that is what he's focusing on. He's like, oh yes, the
Mm,
clear mind is the way of playing shogi.
yeah.
That's kind of what Kiriyama wants to do. So little details like that we'll describe, and even in some circumstances, like if yeah, like I said, if the characters talk about this specific station that they're going to, yeah, people in America or elsewhere, they
We'll
won't
not
know
know
what
that
that
yet.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we might describe that.
I know that fan translations are something that is pretty common nowadays and
Mm.
has been common for a while. Do you believe if there is a role for them in the ecosystem of the manga industry in America? Or do they
Uh,
take away from like publishers like yourself when you want to release
mm,
something, the sales might be lower than if there wasn't a fan translation for it?
I will say it really depends.
Hmm.
For the most part, first of all, we really don't pay much attention to that type of thing.
Yeah.
Until, and this gets really frustrating, there are times when, particularly on our social media, and even at times when we're at conventions, which is even
Yeah.
worse, we do get people telling us, oh yeah, I read the scan for that,
Ah,
uh,
that's
which
tough.
is like it's like a kind of
It's
rubbing it in your
almost in your
face.
face. Yeah.
Yeah, we get that a lot at, especially at the larger conventions. So
Hmm.
AX, we get that so much at AX, and it's very, very frustrating
Yeah,
to get
because
people.
it's unfortunately, it's such a common, like, practice
Yeah,
because it wasn't accessible for a while and people like, there isn't, like, an easier barrier to entry
yeah,
for that versus
right,
just, going through the legal
yeah,
routes, yeah.
yeah. So like, actually, what you just stated, I think we totally understand.
Mhm.
And if a title does find an audience, especially a larger audience, having a few thousand people or even a few hundred people, read a scan isn't gonna like kill a series like a
Yeah.
Naruto or a Death Note or
Yeah,
or
of
most
course.
Shonen Jump titles.
Mhm.
Where it does get a little tricky though is if you're talking about something like Pampania,
Mhm.
that's an artist that Pampania was never scanlated before we published the English edition.
Yeah.
Nobody really knew about him outside of Japan.
Mhm.
And he was never translated into any other language. We were the very first publishers of Pampania outside of Japan. Not
Yeah.
even Korea, not Taiwan, where they license almost everything.
Mhm.
And that's another one of those reasons why Hago Sencha was so happy to work with us. For an artist like Pampania, and this is really sad. Now we see, and because it's in our feeds sometimes,
Mhm.
we see people not scanlating Pampania. They're not doing fan translations, but they're
Yeah.
sharing scans of our
Of the
book.
volumes itself,
Yeah,
yeah, that's
yeah,
rough.
and they're those things are being shared online. And could we go and try to get those things deplatformed? Yeah, but
Mhm.
there's always going to be another node for that stuff, and it's
Yeah.
just whack a
Unfortunately,
mole
yeah.
forever at
Mhm.
that point. So that's where it does get frustrating because, say, for example, Crab Pampania is getting more popular, but not to the point where we can just say, yeah, we'll be printing 20,000 copies of everything that it released. That's not
Yeah.
realistic.
Mhm.
And we're
'Cause
doing
it comes
reprints
with
every
a lot of, like, word of mouth or,
yeah,
like, certain people talking about the series to get people to
right.
get it. It's not too mainstream even now,
And,
yeah.
and on top of that, we specifically licensed that knowing it wasn't going to do gangbusters. Would
Mhm.
would we be happy if it did? That's
Yeah, of
great.
course, yeah.
And it was very interesting for us for Crab to be exhibited at the British Museum in 2020. But
Oh, wow. I did
like
not know that. That's awesome.
yeah, that was super cool. But at the same time, like that didn't impact our sales at all either. It didn't
Mm.
rise things. It didn't make him more of a thing in England.
Yeah.
On the flip side, yeah, now that he's translated into French, I mean, not French, Italian and German, and now most recently he's getting translated into Thai and Korean. Now we're seeing other communities interested in Pampania, but
Mhm.
where they're turning to generally first is are those rips of our
Y
ebooks, and
yeah.
that's a shame because
Mhm.
that's not helping him. And
No,
on top
definitely
of
not.
that, it's creating a situation where like he's getting elevated without
Getting
getting
any of
any
the reward or like
reward. Yeah,
the compensation for it
yeah,
is just happening, which isn't
yeah,
the intention for it. And
exactly.
like a lot of people like don't understand like just how beautiful the touch of this volume is because they'll
Right,
never know about it, which that's why these volumes stand out to me compared to the other ones that I
right.
have. Yeah.
Yeah, so those things are a shame. Like, and
Mhm.
that's also actually that last point that you made too. We actively try to make our books look like something that you would want to have
Mhm.
and hold. And if people don't experience that, then you know they're missing out on part of the
Part of the
greater experience.
experience. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So.
Because I mean, everything from how you choose to read, how where you choose to read, and what you choose to read all impacts your
Hmm.
experience of
Yeah.
that series or creator. So
Yeah. So that's a little bit of a shame.
yeah.
But as I said, just there's we're aware that it's out there. We're
Hmm.
not fully against it. We also know that there are certain titles that we just are almost certain we'll never see translated. And
Yeah.
under those circumstances, it's like, okay, it's a shame that it will never be printed
Hmm.
or even released digitally legally, but those are the circumstances where we can be like, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
At
There's a room for it essentially.
Yeah,
Yeah.
at the same time, I wish there was a little bit more, and I think that we can't put any of this back into Pandora's box, but
Hmm.
being a little older, I wish there was a little bit more of just a sense of community, like in the
Yeah.
'90s, where like when there were fan subs back then,
Hmm.
and then a legal edition came out, basically people just started to slow that down.
Yeah. And
That's no longer a
no,
thing.
that's
Yeah,
definitely not.
that's no
Yeah.
longer a thing.
Hmm.
And the same thing even for anime. Like people can say that you have Crunchyroll and places like that, and yes, those services are doing nicely, but that
Hmm.
has not stopped fan
No,
subbing.
it definitely has
So
not. No. How big was the media boom during the pandemic? Because I know it created a huge, like, just like how big of a
yeah,
difference was it from like sales in 2019 to
yeah.
2020 and onwards?
Well, I'm just going to talk about ourselves because those are
Hmm.
the only things that we have like
Yeah.
concrete numbers with.
Hmm.
Industry wise, things are pretty wild. For us, we were very new in 2019. That was our first just
Like full
year
year.
of actually releasing books. So we only had about 12 books by the end of the year. So it's not really fair to say. But
Hmm.
going into that first half of 2020, when the pandemic was at its height, it was really dire, honestly.
Yeah.
If we didn't release those books in 2019 to the capacity that we did,
Hmm.
and mind you, there were way less delays back then, which is kind of funny. Um,
Yeah.
just and not including like shipping and printing. It was just like we were pretty close to being on schedule back then, just work wise. If we hadn't done that, and if we did not launch with titles like Kaiji and Mari and Emiya, we would not be around. Like
Yeah.
that's just
The
that's
reality
just
of
the
it. Yeah.
reality. We were able to continue even though we stopped all production outside of releasing one volume of Sanpaku Eyes.
Hmm.
Just because we already sent it to the printer, we just stopped everything from March 2020 to around September 2020. So sales are not great, but once people started coming out of shelter in place
Yeah.
and stores started opening up again, and obviously there was also financial compensation from the government too for people.
Hmm. For sure.
Um,
I spent it on a PS5. I will
yeah,
admit. Like.
I'm jealous. I'm still waiting to get one. Uh, yeah, like people had some spending money, and manga was something that a lot of people bought, and
Hmm.
even in our case, once again, it's not fair to describe it this way, but say for example for the last like 5 months of 2020, and then the doldrums that were the first 7 months, we actually were up 300%
Wow.
over 2019. But once again, you have to
That
take
was your
into
first
continuation that was
year.
our
Yeah,
first
yeah.
year.
Mhm.
Yeah, 2021 was a different story. Things are still very good, but this is when like the rest of the industry was really also going crazy.
Mhm.
Some parts of the industry were seeing like 140% growth. We were seeing growth of like 100% relative to 111% relative to 2020 and
Got it.
2021. So
Which was
that's still pretty
already
good.
huge. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So by that point, things were healthy. We're still not profitable though,
Mhm.
just because of costs and the fact that that was also the year that we started hiring two more people. So
Yeah. And I
um,
would imagine you don't get too much of like the cut of every like volume that you get purchased from you, right?
I can't divulge like how much we get
Yeah.
legally. We do get it's a chunk, but out of that chunk we have to pay royalties to the author,
Mhm.
and then out of that chunk too, there are obviously printer costs, and we pay translators and letterers, and keep the lights on here. So
Yeah.
um, you know, out of every book, we may make a dollar.
Mhm. Yeah.
So that's not a lot, and yeah, then after that we have to worry about wages, and
Mhm.
it isn't enough. So those are good times, and those are times where like we started to feel a little bit more confident, but it was also very complicated because internally, we had to struggle with like, okay, do we keep up, do we pick up this schedule, do we go back and start just cranking out everything that we put back on hold, or do we reprioritize certain things? And
Mhm.
yeah, we just started to prioritize things like Mari and Pleasure and Corruption,
And I know another one,
Sampaku.
I'm sure it's I'm not actually sure if there's a physical one, but Lockdown
Hmm.
Zone, level Z or level
Yeah,
X.
yeah, yeah.
Is that
That has no physical; it's digital
okay?
only.
It's
Yeah.
just digital only. Okay, got it.
Yeah, we did a lot of that as well. There were things that we wanted to see that we were surprised by specifically, like Sanpaku we were very surprised by, and
Mhm.
surprised by how well initially Pleasure and Corruption was doing. We didn't want to lose that momentum because didn't know where the momentum was coming from. So we
Yeah.
we prioritized those things. We actually we're hoping to get more Kaiji out, but that is a very complicated story.
And it's a
And
big book, so
yeah,
I'd imagine that comes with all sorts
yeah,
of
big
other
old book,
issues. Yeah.
unfortunately. We even started to pick up things like Heavy Delusion very quickly. So
Hmm.
initially there was like a 1 year gap between volume 1 and volume 2, but
Yeah.
since volume 2 we've been doing another book. I think we've done 3 books in the last year, and volume 5 is already at the printer. So that's picked up quite a bit since
Nice.
2021.
And I hope the anime does bring in a lot of traffic,
Yeah,
because the
yeah,
the
fingers
reason why
crossed.
I had Heavenly Delusion was just because of the key visual that they released.
Mm,
It looked beautiful, and
mm,
like it doesn't take me much to put like an anime into a planning. Like something that
mm.
catches my eyes is more than
Right.
enough. And the trailer came out, I think, a couple days ago, and I watched it, and it looks great. And with the context that I have from reading chapter 1 on your site, I'm excited.
Yeah.
And for me, I have this thing called, I coin it manga preferential bias, where if I
Mm.
read the
That's
manga
okay.
before the
Right.
anime, then I will start comparing like mentally like the manga to the
Mm,
anime, so I don't enjoy
mm,
it as much, which is why I
mm,
haven't read more than chapter 1 for Heavenly. My goal
mm.
is, once the anime is out, I'm gonna go buy up all 4, 5, hopefully, volumes that come out then, and
Right.
start my read.
Yeah. Yeah. From the little that we've worked with the anime
Mhm.
studio, the anime people, it's gonna be pretty faithful. Looks like it's gonna cover mostly up to volume 4,
Okay.
maybe touch of volume 5, which is actually good timing for them too, because I think if it went a little further than that, it would the viewer would be a little frustrated because there's a big shift in the
Got it,
story
near
around
that
then.
end, I guess? Okay.
Yeah.
Then I am very excited for it.
And then just to close
Mhm.
up the last question too,
Yes.
for 2022 relative to 2021,
Mhm.
not as big a change. Obviously, those are really big heights, and I think even industry wise, it wasn't. We saw things go down a bit, but that was about 40% growth, which is still very good. We brought that up when I went to go to Tokyo when I went to Tokyo in January, and
Mhm.
saw the licensors for the first time 3
In almost 2
years.
years, yeah.
Yeah, and everybody was really happy with those type of numbers. They also understood that even at 40%, that's not realistic long
Yeah.
term. But
Mhm.
they were like, yeah, that's all these things are very good. And now we're kind of creeping closer towards like viability. So
Mhm.
that's when the questions again are going to be like, okay, do I hire more people or do I do more licensing and just sit on them? And
Yeah.
that's where like things are going to be debated internally here.
I
But
guess
and then.
one question is, when you sign a contract for license, I don't know if
Hmm.
you can share this, but is there any money exchange during that time, or
Oh
is
yeah,
it all
yeah, yeah,
okay?
yeah. Yeah, there's
So
an
there's that
advance that needs
initial.
to be. Yeah,
Got it, got it, got it.
yes, and it in Japanese parlance, it's called the MG. So that stands for minimum guarantee,
Okay.
and what that means is you have X number of physical copies that you need to print
Mhm.
or physically or pay for in advance.
Got it.
So say you promise that you're going to print at least 5,000 copies. Even if you don't print them, you're going to pay for 5,000 copies
Upfront, got it.
up
Okay.
front. Yeah. And then if you sell more than 5,000 copies, then you're going to pay an additional royalty after that.
Mhm.
So that's
For
how
that,
that works.
okay, got it, got
Yeah.
it.
So that money is done after signing the contract.
Mhm.
And there's also a fee for the files too.
Okay.
So if you get digital files, people are using a lot of people use Adobe Suite over there, but not everybody.
Mhm.
Then you pay for those digital files, or if it's an
Or I
older book,
guess shipping for like I guess, would March could be considered an old enough series to get like like a physical, or is it did it already switch to digital by then?
no, unfortunately not. It's
Okay.
that it's yeah, and then it's the funny thing about March is that it actually is young enough where it should have been,
Mhm.
but Chica Umino, the type of artist where she actually has an art background,
Okay.
she isn't the manga first. She came into manga as a
As an artist,
artist,
got it.
that she was used to drawing on paper. So
Mhm.
everything is on paper, and we have to. That's another reason why our schedule for March. We've been open about this with the public, but our
Yeah.
schedule for March is a little slower than, say, Under Ninja or Vampires,
Mhm.
and it's mostly because we have to go in and literally clean out all of our pages and stuff. If that
Yeah,
was
and
done
to not show the
digitally,
paper texture or
exactly.
something. Yeah, yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense.
And if that was done digitally, it would be a lot easier because you could
Mhm.
just click a couple of mouse strokes, but
Yeah,
in this case, yeah, it's not. It's actually hand manual labor that needs to go in there.
got it.
So,
Sorry, I cut you off. 2022 sales. I think
oh,
that's yes.
yeah. So yeah, that was up another 40%. It was good, not what we saw previously.
Mhm.
And then for even the first couple of months that we have of 2023, we're
Because we
still
haven't
up
hit a full quarter yet,
quarter.
right?
Yeah, I'm actually on that page right now. We're still up right now relative to this time last year,
Hmm.
22%. So
That's
that's not
awesome.
bad too. And yeah, just kind of going back to what I was saying, we're getting to that point where it's like where we may be getting some profits. I actually do have some like cash on hand now,
Hmm.
where it's like, okay, do I just hold on to this and get more staff so we can release these things faster, or
Sounds good. I have one personal
oh yeah,
question
yeah,
in regards
shoot.
to YouTube in general.
Hmm.
Has Denpa had to handle like copyright infringement versus YouTube? Like with
uh
reviews, hint, hint, me
yeah,
potentially
yeah.
in the future if I
No, we
do
don't.
any March stuff, or
Yeah, yeah,
how is that handled?
we don't put up any of those things on our own.
Okay.
So we as a business have no issues with those circumstances. What I
Hmm.
will say is I cannot speak for Japan.
Yeah, of
Uh,
course, of course.
and what I would suggest to you, as well as any other, specifically YouTuber, and or even if you're on Twitch or something like that,
Yeah,
if you're going to be posting interiors, do not post more than 10 pages of a book,
got it.
or else you could get in trouble. I'm not going to
Hmm.
say that you will,
Yeah, but
uh,
there's always that
but
possibility.
yeah, because even internally, as the publisher, we are permitted to only give out for advertising or marketing services a maximum of 10 pages.
Got it. So
Uh,
that's a good
so
rule of thumb
yeah.
for me since I will be technically free advertising by putting it up
Yeah,
on YouTube. But yeah,
yeah.
that makes sense.
And then if we want to do like previews on Amazon or things like that,
Hmm.
we are technically allowed to do either a chapter or 20% of a individual series,
Okay.
but those are the rights that we're permitted, and we can't do
Yeah.
anything more than that. So,
And that's usually based on the site itself that has
oh
that,
no,
right?
that's something that actually our contract with the licensor, so it'll be the Japanese
Oh, okay.
publisher
Okay.
or the authors clearly state.
Hmm.
So it's gotten to that point because of what you're saying,
Hmm.
because they figured out, oh yeah, Amazon only posts X number of pages anyway, or
Hmm.
Barnes and Noble, places like that. But that is actually something they stipulate now to us. So,
Got it. All right. Where can we find you, Mr. Chavez?
well, first of all, you can find Denpa at denpa.pub. So denpa.pub. We are working currently on the site. I've actually been told by the IT team that we should be getting the e-reader working again for new uploads
Perfect.
very soon. I'm actually going to test that out later today.
Hmm.
So hopefully, if that works out, there is a backlist of about 6 books that haven't been uploaded on there. That if that does work, those 6 are going to go up
Got it.
within the next week or two. We are going to start like doing some more things with that site too. Now that it seems as if people are actually going to be working on the back end of it, so hopefully in the future there'll be a lot more than just the releases. I mean, we have plans on maybe having a blog and maybe a release schedule and things like that. So maybe even a podcast in the future, but.
Nice.
Then where you can get most of our information is on Twitter. Our handle is Denpa_books. Yeah, we try to engage with the reader quite a bit. We do a lot of weird little things like, yeah, as you saw, share proof
The proofs. Yeah.
images, usually drop covers as soon as we get approval from Japan, which is pretty nice. And then, yeah, just keep people up to date in regards to where our production is for books. We also do sales there through DM, which is a little weird, but has been pretty successful for us
Hmm.
so far. And then me personally, you can find me also on Twitter. That's basically the only social media I use. My handle is MangaCast. So
Manga
that's
cast. Got it.
MangaCast. I used to talk about manga a lot more there. I
Hmm.
do. That's basically my full-time job. now, so I don't necessarily spend that much time on there discussing it. But
Yeah.
if there are like significant topics about the industry that I feel need a little bit of fleshing out, I'll usually go in there and share my thoughts about that. If not, most of what I do there is about like sports and food, things like that. So
Got it. Sounds great.
all right.
Awesome. So this was the interview with Ed Chavez from Denpa, and thank you for stopping by.